10 minutes before my sister was meant to walk down the aisle, my dad leaned in close enough that I could smell his aftershave. Sharp, expensive, the kind he only wore when he wanted to look important. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Why are you even here?" he muttered, like he was asking about a stain on the carpet. We were standing inside the chapel. White flowers everywhere. Soft music floating about like nothing bad was allowed to happen in a place this pretty. People were laughing quietly, pretending not to clock what was going on. And there I was, near the back, coat folded over my arm, wedding card pressed flat in my hand, already halfway out the door in my head. I'd planned it that way. In, smile, hand the card over, hug my sister, then disappear before anything awkward kicked off. I'd rehearsed it all morning like some low-risk operation. Because today wasn't about me. It never was. And because my dad had made it very clear, years ago, that I was never supposed to take up too much space. I kept my voice level. "I'm just here for her. I'll keep out the way." He scanned the room, checking who might be watching. "Good," he said. "Don't make it weird." Then he turned his back on me like the conversation didn't matter. That familiar tight feeling settled just under my ribs, the one that shows up before old instincts wake up. Breathe. Stay calm. Don't react. Years of training don't just vanish because you're back in your hometown. I took a step toward the side door. That's when I noticed the groom. Ethan had been laughing a minute earlier, messing with his cufflinks, buzzing with nerves like any bloke about to get married. But the second his eyes landed on me, it was like someone had pulled the plug. His face drained. Not nerves. Not confusion. Recognition. He went completely still. Then he turned sharply and walked straight down the aisle, past the flowers, past the photographer, right up to the front pew where his dad was sitting. General Thomas Hale. Even in a suit, you could tell what he was. Some people carry authority without trying. It sits in their spine, in the way they occupy space. Ethan leaned down and whispered, "Dad, it's her." The general didn't react straight away. Then his head turned. His eyes locked onto me across the chapel, and the whole room shifted. He stood up. Not slowly. Not carefully. Chairs scraped. Conversations died mid-sentence. The string quartet stopped like someone had flicked a switch. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that hits right before something cracks. The general straightened his jacket and came to full attention. Then, right there, in the middle of my sister's wedding, he saluted. Clean. Sharp. Precise. He said, voice steady and clear. "It's an honor." Every pair of eyes in that room swung towards me. I didn't smile. I didn't move. I returned the salute without thinking, muscle memory doing its thing before my brain could catch up. When my hand dropped, the silence stretched so long it felt unreal. That's when I saw my dad. The color had drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, closed. He looked like a man who just realized the story he'd been telling himself for years didn't hold up anymore. I hadn't come to be seen. I hadn't come to be recognized. I'd come because my sister asked me. Because my mum would have wanted me there. Because some promises don't expire just because they're inconvenient. The general lowered his hand and gave a small nod, like we were the only two people in the room. "Forgive the interruption," he said calmly. "But respect is never out of place." Music stumbled back into life, thin and unsure. People shifted in their seats, pretending they hadn't just witnessed something massive. I slid into a chair near the aisle, hands folded, heart steady, too steady, the way it gets after the danger's already past. My dad stared straight ahead, jaw locked, refusing to look at me. Good. Let him sit with it. Because in that moment, I realized something I'd spent years avoiding. I never needed him to see me. But I was done letting him decide whether I mattered. And if that salute was only the beginning, then whatever came next was going to change everything. Because what my father didn't know, what no one in that room understood yet, was why that general recognized me, and what it was about to expose. Once the music found its feet again, everyone pretended nothing had happened. That's what people do when the truth turns up uninvited. They smooth their clothes, fix their faces, and act like the ground didn't just shift underneath them. I stayed seated near the aisle, back straight, hands folded in my lap. From the corner of my eye, I could see my dad a few rows ahead of me, shoulders rigid, jaw set like he was holding something in place with his teeth. He didn't look back. Not once. Fair enough. The officiant cleared his throat and started again, voice wobbling slightly, like he wasn't fully convinced this wedding was still in one piece. And that's when my mind did what it always does when I'm forced to sit still in a place that used to be home. It drifted backwards. I grew up in this town. One supermarket. One secondary school. Friday nights under stadium lights and Sunday mornings in stiff shirts that smelled like starch and impatience. My dad loved things that made him look solid. Respectable. The sort of man people nodded at in the street. He worked hard. I'll give him that. Early starts. Late finishes. Firm handshakes. He believed in rules, in appearances, in doing things the right way. And my sister, she fit perfectly into that world. Easy smile. Followed the plan. Never rocked the boat. Me. I was the quiet one. The awkward one. The one who asked too many questions and didn't know when to stop pushing. When I told him I was enlisting, I was 19. He stared at me like I'd announced I was moving to Mars. For what? He asked. You're not built for that. I didn't argue. I'd already learned that explanations were just an invitation for him to tell me why I was wrong. My mom stood in the doorway, drying her hands on a tea towel. She didn't say much. She never did when things got tense. But later that night she sat on the edge of my bed and said something I never forgot. Your father measures worth in a way that leaves some people out. Don't let that make you small. Training was brutal, but it was honest. You either did the work or you didn't. No charm. No family name. No shortcuts. Respect was earned quietly, one decision at a time. Somewhere along the line, people started listening when I spoke. I never told my dad about the commendations. The late nights. The missions that didn't make the news because nothing went wrong. When he asked what I did, I kept it vague. I helped people, I'd say. He liked that version of my life. Soft around the edges, unimpressive enough not to challenge him. So I let him keep it. Back in the chapel, my sister appeared at the end of the aisle. Radiant. Nervous. Real. When her eyes found mine, she smiled. Small. Grounding. Exactly what I needed. Whatever else happened today, I wasn't letting her moment break. As she reached the front, I felt movement beside me. The general had shifted slightly in his seat. He didn't look at me, but his presence was solid, like a weight the room had quietly adjusted around. The vows began. Words about love and patience and choosing each other, even when it's hard. I listened properly and felt something loosen in my chest. This part, at least, was right. But I could feel my dad unraveling a few rows ahead. When the officiant pronounced them married, the room exhaled. Applause burst out, real this time. My sister laughed through her tears. Ethan looked like a man who'd just survived something without realizing he'd been holding his breath. Then the general stood again, not sharp this time. Deliberate. He faced my dad. Mr. Walker, he said calmly. My dad looked up like he'd been addressed by the wrong name. Yes. The general shook his hand. Firm. Measured. Thank you for welcoming us today. Your daughter has chosen well. Thank you, my dad replied automatically, defaulting to manners like a lifebuoy. Then the general added, Your other daughter has served this country with distinction. It wasn't praise. It wasn't an attack. Just a fact. My dad swallowed. I didn't realize. The general nodded once. Many don't. That doesn't change the truth. And just like that, he stepped away. The chapel emptied slowly, people moving with the careful energy of folks who knew they'd just witnessed something they didn't fully understand but would definitely talk about later. I stayed seated for a moment, letting the room clear around me. I wasn't hiding. I was choosing my timing. Because when my dad finally turned and looked at me, really looked, there was something new in his expression. Not anger. Not dismissal. Uncertainty. And that's when I knew. Whatever version of me he'd been carrying all these years was starting to crack. And the thing about cracks is this. Once they start, they don't stop. Especially when the truth follows you into the reception hall. The reception hall was only a short walk from the chapel, but it felt like stepping into a different world. Lower ceiling. Warmer lights. Round tables dressed up in white cloth like everything was under control again. It wasn't. People laughed too loudly. Adjusted jackets that didn't need adjusting. Took sips of drinks they clearly didn't want. No one mentioned what had happened, but it sat in the room like weather. Heavy. Unavoidable. I took a seat near the edge, close enough to see my sister without being dragged into the center of things. That had always been my place in this family. Present, but optional. Across the room, the general stood by the window talking quietly with Ethan. Heads close, voices low. I caught bits as I passed. Timing, respect. Not today. Ethan nodded like a man trying to keep his day from tipping over. My dad hovered near the head table, surrounded by relatives who suddenly looked unsure of their footing. The confident host routine was slipping. He kept glancing my way, then away, like eye contact might cost him something. A server set a glass of water in front of me. "You all right?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I said. "All good." She smiled, relieved, and moved on. The general caught my eye from across the room and gave a small nod. Not a command, not a summons, just acknowledgement. I returned it and stayed put. Then my dad broke away from the group and came towards my table. He stopped a few feet away, like there was an invisible line he wasn't sure he was allowed to cross anymore. "I didn't know," he said. I looked up at him properly this time. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper. His hands, once rock solid, trembled slightly at his sides. "I didn't hide," I said. "You didn't ask." "That's not fair," he snapped, then caught himself. "No," I agreed. "It isn't." He glanced around, checking who might be listening. "That man," he said quietly. "He didn't have to do that. Make a scene." "He didn't," I replied. "He showed respect. In front of everyone. In front of the truth." That landed. Before he could answer, a glass clinked at the front of the room. My sister stood, glowing, thanking everyone for coming. Talking about love, family, how grateful she was to be surrounded by people who mattered. Her eyes found mine. She smiled. My dad followed her gaze, and something shifted in his face. Not acceptance, not yet, but recognition. Like a story he'd been telling himself for years had finally sprung a leak. Dinner was served. Plates passed. Forks clinked. Conversation slowly crept back, cautious at first. Halfway through the meal, the general stood. He didn't tap a glass. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood, and the room quieted like it recognized the signal. "I'll be brief," he said. "Today is about Emily and Ethan. I won't take that from them." He paused. But service doesn't always look the way people expect. Sometimes it's loud. Sometimes it's visible. And sometimes it isn't. The room leaned in without realizing it. There are people among us who've carried weight they never spoke about, made decisions that ensured others came home, then returned quietly to their lives. His gaze shifted just enough to include me, without naming me. "I ask only that we respect that kind of service," he finished. "Especially when it belongs to our own." No applause, just silence. My dad stayed at his plate like the answer might be written there. Later, as people drifted towards the dance floor, the general approached my table. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the chair beside me. "Of course." He sat, posture relaxed now. "Your father's struggling." "That's not new," I said. "No," he agreed, "but it may be necessary." Across the room, my dad watched us, not angry, not defensive, afraid. And that's when the general said it, quietly, without drama, the sentence that changed everything. "You saved my son." I looked at him. He met my eyes. Not directly, but the unit you pulled out. They rotated forward months later. He was with them. The room blurred for a second. My dad set his glass down too hard at the bar. The sound carried. The general stood. "I should speak to him." "You don't have to," I said. "I want to," he replied gently. Not to correct him, just to tell him the truth. He crossed the room. Conversations died as he passed. I watched my father's face change. Confusion, denial, something like grief. And I knew then. The version of me he'd built to stay comfortable was about to collapse completely. Because once the general finished that conversation, my father was coming back to me, and there was no hiding left. I didn't move when the general crossed the room. I didn't need to. Some moments aren't meant to be interrupted. They are meant to be witnessed from a distance. My dad straightened as the general approached. Pure instinct. Old habits die hard. They spoke quietly near the bar, voices low enough that no one could hear the words, but you didn't need subtitles to follow what was happening. My dad's face changed in stages. Confusion first, then resistance, then something that looked a lot like grief. He shook his head once, like he was trying to dislodge a thought too heavy to carry. The general gestured, not at me, but at the room. At the people. At the day. Finally, my dad nodded. When the general came back, he didn't sit straight away. He's been telling himself a story for a long time, he said quietly. Today interrupted it. That doesn't mean it ends, I replied. No, he said, but it cracks. My dad approached slowly, like each step had to be negotiated. He stopped in front of me, eyes fixed just past my shoulder. I didn't know, he said again. This time it sounded different. Less defensive. More hollow. I stood. We were nearly the same height now. That felt strange. You knew what you wanted to know, I said. That was enough. His mouth opened, closed. I thought you chose something smaller. I met his eyes. I chose something real. Silence wrapped around us. Not hostile. Just honest. I don't need you to understand, I said. I need you to stop pretending I don't exist unless it suits you. His shoulders sagged, just slightly. I don't know how to fix this. I'm not asking you to, I replied. Just don't break it again. He nodded once. That was all he had. The cake cutting was announced like a lifeline. People clapped too eagerly, grateful for something normal to do with their hands. The room leaned back into celebration, carefully, like testing water that might still be hot. I stood near the edge of the dance floor, watching my sister laugh as Ethan wiped icing from her nose. For a moment, the years between us disappeared. We were kids again, stealing batter from the bowl while Mum pretended not to notice. The general stood nearby, close but not crowding. He understood proximity better than most. You handled that well, he said. I didn't say much. Exactly. Across the room, my dad watched the cake cutting with forced attention. His hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. Every now and then, he glanced my way, then looked down, like eye contact might demand something he wasn't ready to give. Good. Let it sit. Then the general stepped forward and caught the DJ's eye. Just a nod. 30 seconds. That's all it took. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ said, unsure but obedient. If I could have your attention for just a moment. The general took the microphone, didn't adjust it, didn't test it. He didn't need to. I won't keep you, he said. Today belongs to Emily and Ethan. He paused, letting the room settle. But sometimes weddings bring truths together that don't usually share the same space. People shifted in their seats. My dad went very still. Importance, the general continued, isn't decided by titles or guest lists. It's measured by what you do when it costs you something. His gaze moved, not searching, simply including. There are people here who carried responsibility quietly, who did the work because it needed doing, not because someone was watching. He inclined his head once and handed the microphone back. No applause, just a collective exhale. I felt it move through me, not relief, not victory. Air returning. My dad didn't look at me. He stayed at the table, eyes glassy. For the first time I could remember, he looked smaller, not weak, just stripped of the armor he'd relied on for decades. And I realized then, this wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about what came next, and whether he was finally ready to face it. Because later that night, away from the crowd, my father said something he'd never said before, and it changed the rules completely. By the time the band started playing something slow and familiar, the reception had found its rhythm again. Couples drifted onto the dance floor. Laughter came back in layers. From the outside, it probably looked like a normal wedding. It wasn't. Truth has a way of rearranging rooms, even after the music returns. I slipped outside, letting the cool night air hit my face. String lights were draped between old trees, humming softly like they were keeping watch. Inside, The bass thumped through the walls, steady and distant. For the first time all day, I let my shoulders drop. Footsteps approached, measured, familiar. You always did prefer the edges, the general said, joining me at the railing. The edges tell you more than the center, I replied. He nodded. Your sister's proud of you. That's enough, I said. We stood in silence for a moment, watching cars lined up in the car park, the road beyond disappearing into the dark. Then the door opened again. Heavier footsteps this time. My dad stopped a few feet away. I didn't turn straight away. I didn't need to. I keep replaying it, he said eventually. That moment in the chapel. I waited. The way he stood, he continued. The way everyone stopped. I've never seen anything like that. You weren't meant to, I said gently. It wasn't for you. He exhaled, shaky. I said something I can't take back. Yes, I said. You did. He flinched, but didn't retreat. I don't know when it started, he said. This distance. You were always so quiet. I thought if I didn't see it, it wasn't happening. That was convenient, I replied. He nodded. I didn't know how to be proud of something I couldn't explain to other people. There it was, the sentence under all the others. I wasn't built to make you comfortable, I said. I was built to do the work. He rubbed his hands together, a nervous habit I remembered from when I was a kid. When your mum got sick, he said, you stepped in without being asked. You handled things I couldn't. I told myself that didn't count. It counted, I said. That was love. Silence settled. Not heavy, just real. I failed you, he said. The words hung there, fragile and rare. I'm not asking you to fix the past, I said eventually. I'm asking you to stop rewriting it. He nodded slowly. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not offering it, I said, not cruelly. Not yet. He accepted that. I don't want to lose you, he said. I turned then, really turned, and met his eyes. You don't lose me by telling the truth. You lose me by pretending I never mattered. The door opened again. My sister stepped out, heels in her hand, hair slightly undone, glowing with joy and exhaustion. She looked between us, reading the space instantly. You okay? She asked me quietly. I am, I said, and meant it. She smiled, relief washing over her face. Good. Come dance with me before the night's over. One song, I said. That's all I need. As we turned back inside, my dad spoke softly. I won't say that again. I looked at him. Good. You deserve better. It wasn't an apology. Not quite. Morning came quietly. No dramatic sunrise. No sense of triumph. Just pale light slipping through thin curtains and birds arguing in the trees like they always had. I dressed simply and stepped out onto the porch with a mug of coffee warming my hands. 20 minutes later, my dad's car pulled up. We drove to the diner without much conversation. Same place he'd taken us when we were kids. Cracked vinyl seats, laminated menus, the smell of toast and burnt coffee hanging in the air. We sat across from each other like two people learning how to share space again. He didn't perform. He didn't explain. He listened. I won't speak for you anymore, he said finally. I nodded. That's enough. No hug. We were never a hugging family unless something broke. This time, nothing did. On the drive out of town, the road opened up. Fields gave way to sky. The radio played something steady and unremarkable, and for once, that felt right. For years, I'd carried a tightness in my chest I couldn't name. Not anger. Not sadness. Something closer to compression. Like I'd been holding myself smaller to fit into a version of me that made other people comfortable. That pressure was gone. Not because my dad had changed overnight. Not because a general had spoken. But because I'd stopped waiting for permission to exist as I am. I hadn't come home to be seen. I'd come home to stand straight. And that difference mattered. If you've ever been in a room where someone tried to make you feel small, if you've ever carried your worth quietly while the world looked the other way, remember this. You don't need a spotlight to matter. You don't need permission to take up space. And sometimes, the truest kind of justice isn't loud at all. It's just the air coming back when you finally stop holding your breath.